Welcome to the Reasons to Reason podcast. I'm your host and captain, Sal Galati. This is the show that's going to talk about all the things we're not supposed to: God, religion, and politics. So strap in, prepare to get offended, and maybe, just maybe, our nation can learn how to reason again. Thanks for joining us again. I hope you enjoyed the last episode and my conversation with Luke. After listening to it and talking to him, we tried to game plan it ahead of time somewhat so we didn't interrupt, which is our natural inclination. We talk over each other a little bit, more than him, obviously. But I think after listening to it, I think it opened up some deeper questions. I shared some stuff with him after where he's like, well, why didn't you say that in the podcast? You always have regrets of what got communicated, but it was a great convo, and I hope to have more with him. Since then, there's 2, 3, maybe even 4 folks that wanted to do something similar. Maybe not exactly the same content, but have that discussion where we kind of agree, but we disagree, and navigate through that and see what we can learn. And I'm hoping that I'm modeling something for you guys that you could carry on in your personal lives. So today's show is called Mafia Politics. I've been thinking about this for a while, and ideas have come and gone. And I want to draw some comparisons between the two because I think there's a lot to be learned in doing that. So one overarching thing is, even if people want to do good and go into politics with a good intention and really clean things up, reform, all those things, I feel like something that happens to them is they get in and then they're offered a deal, and probably something that's a little dirty, a little corrupt, some quick cash or promise a job when you do get voted out. And if they don't take it, it's like it upsets the establishment. And I can't prove this happens. I've heard examples of people talk about it, but if you don't get dirty with them, they don't trust you. Get a little dirty with us, then it's good, because now we got some dirt on you and we know you're not going to kind of rat out us on what's going on here. And obviously that's a mafia move, right? Before you get in, you got to do something illegal, oftentimes very illegal, so that they know they have something on you and you're not going to rat on them, because then you could be held accountable as well. So I see that similarity there. Another similarity I see is, the mafia, the history of the mafia, and not the U.S. mafia. Let's go back to Sicily. It was a noble pursuit. It was some people getting together because they recognized it was a relatively lawless area, not a lot of government. There were foreign invasions constantly, and land disputes and access to water. So they banded together to kind of protect those that couldn't protect themselves and just try to establish some rule and order and protection. And as time went on and they got more powerful, they started turning that against the people they were trying to help. It got corrupt. And I see that a lot in our government and our quasi-governmental agencies. So we could talk about the FDA or CDC. And we'll get some more detailed examples, but I believe those institutions started off with wonderful intentions and they did a lot of great work. But as time has gone on and morality has decayed, I think they've been corrupted. And instead of serving and protecting the citizen from maybe harmful ingredients in our food, harmful drugs with side effects that outweigh the benefits, they're more serving the drug companies and the food companies. And we could see why that would happen. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. I want to quote something from the Gospel of Matthew, and this is Jesus speaking. No one can serve 2 masters. He will either hate one or love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So this is this idea of money is evil. Money is not evil. What's evil is loving money more than God. So it's where you put it in its priority. And this is what he's saying there. And I think this is what happens to these institutions. Whether you call it God or just a higher morality, when you put that below money, greed, you get the results that we're getting now. This isn't that hard of a concept to wrap our head around. Quote the Bob Dylan song again. You got to serve someone. You're either going to serve the Lord or you're going to serve the devil. And this is very consistent, honestly, with the biblical world. There's a passage from Paul where he says, the God of this world has veiled the eyes of the unbeliever. And when he says God, it's a small g. Many, many gods in our lives. Money, leisure, power, success. They're not necessarily bad things, but they're not God. And when you think that you could get peace, fulfillment from those things, you're let down. You become a slave to them. You could just never get enough. You can never get enough power. You can never get enough money. That's what the message is, really. I believe that these institutions are now serving a master that's not God. And if you don't believe in God, then a master that is pure intention, goodwill, really helping our citizens. So, personal anecdote. I had a conversation with someone this weekend, actually, and I could tell as we were talking, I had a sense of like he was one that was very trusting in the institutions. And so we started talking, and I went about it my way because I have a way of going about things. So whatever. We were talking about the healthcare system. He was an advocate for single payer. And I said, for me, like once you go that route, and this isn't a single payer conversation, but once you go there, it's really hard to go back. So before going there, I'm one to take let's do the easy, low-hanging fruit first, and then make the drastic change if we have to. So we both recognize there's a problem with our healthcare system. So what's the fix? So I suggested something like, well, if we clean up the food, let's see how that simmers, and let's see how much cost we take out of the system of people with diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, just by simply cleaning up the food. And he says something, well, if you got people that want to abolish the FDA, how are you going to get rid of the poison in the food? And I said, it seems to me that the FDA has allowed the poison in the food. So we want to protect these institutions that have failed. And it's not about blowing it up. You don't blow it all up and dismantle it, but you got to set in some structures that prevent it from being corrupted. For example, wouldn't it make a lot of sense if you disallowed the people working in the FDA to work for the companies that they're regulating and vice versa? It's just a merry-go-round. This was presented as conspiracy theory a few years ago, but now it's obviously that's what's going on. I mean, let's not judge, and it's not that radical. Money corrupts people. And if you get promised a gig, if you kind of let something pass by the regulators and then 2 years later you're sitting in a cushy boardroom somewhere for a food company, not a lot of people say no to that, unfortunately. And our morality has gone down, and you see people around you getting away with that. Why don't you participate in it? But if you set up systems to prevent that from happening, now we have an FDA that's working for, dummy citizen over here versus the food company, which seems to be the case. So I explained that to him. I could see he was agreeing with me, but he didn't want to agree with me too much because then it would maybe have to change his view on certain people coming into a new administration. So another comparison to the mafia, accountability. And I learned this during COVID of how things were set up where you were talking to people that you thought were actually responsible for the decisions being made, i.e. a school board, and you go down the process with them for 2-3 months, and then you get to the end of the row with them, and then they point a finger and they go, well, we don't really decide. This association decides, or that association decides. And I'm sure many of you felt that. It was just when you picture people either just pointing fingers in opposite directions. No one knew where the decision maker was, and I believe it's all by design. The system, the government set up with levels of kind of places for you to vent, but not really get results or hold people accountable. And the people you think you voted in that make the decisions really don't. So how do I compare that to the mafia? The Godfather. Okay, it was Godfather 2. I remembered it, and then I watched the highlight this morning. So they're interviewing one of the higher ups in the organization, and it's a Senate hearing, and essentially the conversation goes, you work for the Corleone family. Yeah, sometimes I gotta push a button on a guy, and we're like, what's push a button? He goes, murder someone. Yeah, okay. And then the question is has Michael Corleone ever requested you directly to murder someone? He goes, no, I don't talk to him. He goes, the message comes through layers or someone else. The word was buffer. That was the word. He goes, yeah, there's a lot of buffers in our family. And that was the joke, because the way it's set up is you can never hold the guy actually responsible accountable, much like our government. So I hope you see the comparisons. And we felt a lot of this during the COVID years, but again, it's not COVID, it's not lockdowns. Things have gotten back to normal, but the systems are still there that we need to fix. And step one, is just recognizing what's going on. There's a lot of good people at the schools, of course. There's a lot of good people at the FDA, of course. But can we recognize there's things in place that allow for things maybe not to go great, and not be so afraid of reforming something and just by questioning something, like I'm the antagonist for observing reality and what's going on and suggesting, hey, there's got to be a better way. And this is leading me now to the article. It was from back in March, but it talks to this topic, and I think it really highlights kind of how everything's, the media obviously doesn't do a great job of just laying out the situations and letting people decide. It confuses, it disorients. We've talked about that before. I've given you examples of that before. But I think this is a prime example of that. So the article is Illinois to fund school libraries who remove controversial books. If you Google it, you'll find it's by John Clark. It's from March 8th, 2023. So I'm going to read the article, parts of it, and then kind of untwist some stuff. Illinois has become the first state in the nation to introduce legislation that would withhold state funding from any public or school library that removes controversial books from their shelves. My first thing is does the state of Illinois really have nothing else to work on? Because there's a lot of problems in the state of Illinois. But nonetheless, maybe you think the state of Illinois is run well. Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Giulianis announced the proposed legislation on Wednesday, which would make libraries ineligible for state-funded grants if they remove books because of partisan or personal disapproval or fail to issue a statement against banning books. Now, this whole thing about banning books, and we're going to talk about the books in question. But one thing, you can't ban a book that's never been put on the shelf. And I challenge you to go to the library and think of some books that are maybe very important, very critical. I mean, I've had an example. I think the book was Little Woman. And I should have verified with my wife. I think that's the book where we went to the library to find it. And there was like one copy amongst 4 or 5 libraries. And it was just bizarre. You know, a very good, wholesome book. That one is very difficult to find. But yet maybe some other books that we'll get to, many, many copies of them. And why is that? So I promote, like, let's put all the books in there, sure. But let's put a section where we present, like, differing worldviews, differing sides of an issue on the shelf. Not just one side. I mean, if I were to argue that the library is a bit one-sided, I don't think anyone would consider me speaking out of turn. So that's what a library's for, right? Mix it up. I'm not afraid of ideas. I'm not afraid of discussing. This is the First Amendment. That's why it's there. So presenting that the one side is protecting people from banning books, yet that side never even allows certain books on the shelf. That's the untwisting I'm doing here. So Juliana says that the Illinois Library System Act comes after extremist groups, here we go, including the far-right nationalist group, the Proud Boys, have targeted Illinois libraries, divided communities, harassed librarians across the country, even though the books are not required reading for anyone. So I'm sorry. Anyone who suggests a book, now the book is going to come up here. I think it's called Genderqueer. I know it's called Genderqueer. And this is the only book I'm going to describe because it's so evident. And I haven't looked in any other ones because I really don't want to look. But in that book, there's a cartoon drawing of a boy blowing another boy. This is the book we're talking about. And I'll show you later how he's trying to writer of the article is trying to lump that book with like To Kill a Mockingbird. Complete farce. But me suggesting that book doesn't belong in certain sections of the library, I mean, whether it belongs in the library at all. I mean, they're children. They're young people. We could have that discussion, but in certain sections, certainly not. But that's the book in question. And to label someone an extremist for suggesting maybe that book shouldn't be in a public library where there's kids, I'll let you arrive to your conclusion. It's scare tactics. Far right. I mean, everything's far right that the author doesn't agree with. So we'll keep reading here. Oh, another thing. Our library, back when I spoke up, one of the things that was happening too was, because, you know, anyone questioning these things is the divider and the divisive person, and I'm not going to subscribe to that. They were having Zoom calls. Librarian was having Zoom calls with children talking about these books. Now, that's completely inappropriate. And I said, how is it not just a simple thing that you get the parents' consent before you have that conversation? And they looped around it saying, like, I didn't have the right to interfere in there. All you need to do is have an adult library card. That is how you access the Zoom and get consent from the adult parent. If you want your child to engage in that conversation with a complete stranger, that's your right. I'm not here to interfere in anyone's life, but I'm well aware that there's many parents that weren't even aware that was going on. And the librarian that was working at our particular library, and I don't even know if she's there anymore, but she had a tweet on her profile that said that the Dewey Decimal System was white supremacist. And other things too. I don't want to dog her. I would never use even her username. I don't even know if she's there anymore. But again, the article's written to say that people questioning these things are divisive people and they're dividing their communities. That's not the case at all. Nationally, the attempt to ban books have been rising, including right here in Illinois, Juliana said. Books that include subject matters like COVID-19, pandemic, acclaimed authors like Toni Morrison, best-selling novels like The Kite Runner, classics like To Kill a Mockingbird have been challenged right here in the land of. So obviously To Kill a Mockingbird should not be banned. I don't know where that's coming from. I think what I've heard is it's portraying white people as like the savior for blacks, which that's a messed up spin on that classic and what that book was the message that book was trying to get across. So again, distractions to associate. Let's get to the meat of the matter. The 2 most challenged books, okay, finally we're getting there. On the ALA's top 10 list have been in the news often. Maya Kobabi's graphic memoir about sexual identity, genderqueer, that's the book I just referenced, and Jonathan Vision's Longboy, a coming-of-age novel narrated by a young gay man. So first off, the ALA, American Library Association. So this is the systems, right, in place. You look at their library board. There was a woman I don't think she's on there anymore because she kind of made herself to be a fool. But her big claim to fame when she got elected to be on that board was that she was a lesbian Marxist. Now, I don't care if she's a lesbian, but an open Marxist on the library board that's allocating money. I mean, Marxists are not known for having a wide range of views. They tend to censor. They want their view, and they bully everyone else out. So now that's the person that's the head of the ALA. So this ALA becomes this authority figure. You go to a library and go, well, why is this book in here? Why is this book not? Well, the ALA suggested it. And this goes back to the mafia kind of thing, where the money it's our money as the state. We get it ripped away from us. It goes to these associations, and then they dole out based on the libraries doing the behavior that they want. So if you have a library district in Southern Illinois, is going to be very different than one in Chicago as far as its constituency, values, what they want. So why is the people down south got to kick up to this association and then be punished because they don't behave appropriately? You see? These are the ideas like with the Department of Education, for example. On a federal scale, they collect all the money and then they dole it out based on how everyone behaves and if whether or not they're enacting the agendas that they want enacted. But if the money were to reside in a state, hypothetically, then you would have a lot less of perhaps the ideologies of DC don't align with Tulsa or don't align with Austin or don't align with Sacramento or don't align with Springfield or whatever city you want in the nation. Let the money stay local. Let the decision making stay local. There's nothing wrong with that. Last year, the Harlem School District in Machesney Park banned genderqueer, saying the graphic novel contained graphic illustrations of sexual acts. I love how it's even worded. They were saying it does. If you just open up the book, it's there. The scourge of censorship has a chilling effect on our democracy. These efforts have nothing to do with books. Instead, they're about ideas that certain individuals disagree with and believe no one should think or be allowed to think, Giuliani said. No, sorry. That's not it. I'm not afraid of ideas. I'm not the one that's looking to censor anybody. Our government has been censoring these people, our people, the nation that is, for at a very high degree in the last few years, and I would say to a much lower degree and not as noticeable in the years prior to that. But please, I mean, I'm not trying to change people's ideas. I'm trying to protect children from pornography. And that's what it is. Let's not be around the bush about it. And I'm not talking about every single book, and it's not about gay or trans. It's about a drawing of a boy blowing another boy at the library, okay? Online retailer Amazon received criticism for removing books such as When Harry Became Sally, responding to the transgender movement, which highlights contradictions between the media's sunny depiction of gender transition and the often sad realities of gender identity struggles. Amazon said the book, which has been on sale for 3 years, fell under a broad guideline that restricts content that we determine as hate speech, promotes the abuse or sexual exploitation of children, contains pornography, glorifies rape or pedophilia, advocates terrorism, or other material we deem inappropriate or offensive. So I don't know. The book was banned that was pretty much highlighting a person that went through this transition and then regretted it and wanted to tell her story. The hate speech thing, that's kind of a term that's kind of dangerous to me. I don't want to say anything hateful to anyone. I understand the concern, but I think that label is often used to just shout down people that have a view that is different than yours and actually is better argumented. Currently, Illinois law does not contain language related to book banning or eligibility for state grants that restrict access. Last fiscal year, the Secretary of State's office awarded 1,631 grants to Illinois libraries, totaling more than $62 million. Of those, 90% of the grants were awarded to public and school libraries, with public libraries receiving 877 grants and the school libraries securing 712 grants. All this to say, you see the money and the power and how agendas get enacted and how people are punished, and the accountability is hard to track down. The ALA sitting on top of your library board, and I mean, everyone's just trying to behave to get access to the money, but the money is our money. And rather than rip it from people on their property taxes and then allocate it to enact agendas that are against the will of the people, do we really need it? Do we really need the ALA? I don't know. What's its purpose? I think the nation would be fine without the ALA. I really do. But at least ask the question. The FDA, the CDC, I believe we need these things, but we need them to work well. And they need to regain their trust. And me questioning them is not the problem. They've discredited themselves through the things that they do and continue to do. So let's protect these institutions. Let's revamp them. Let's set up basic things to protect them from being corrupted. I mean, if you put in a policy that says, hey, you want to work for the FDA, you can't work for the entities you're regulating. Maybe forever. You want to go into this work, it's got to be something you have a lot of pride in. Pay them well. Make sure they do a good job. Keep the poison out of the food. But don't let poison in the food and tell me when I go, what are you doing? Don't make it that I'm the problem. I'll leave you with this thought. There's a cartoon I saw a while back. It's really clever. And it's how I feel a lot of times. It's a bunch of guys sitting in a boat. And one of the guy goes, hey, there's a hole in the boat. You can see water springing up. And then you go around the boat and nobody wants to address the issue. They just want to be a smart aleck. Who made you head of the boat? Maybe the hole's supposed to be there. I like it better with the whole. Meanwhile, everyone with their smart aleck answer, the whole is still there. So we got poison in the food. That's not a mystery. That's not nothing to argue about. There's poison in the food. How do we get the poison out? Okay, whether it's we revamp the FDA, whatever it is, let's do that instead of maligning people that question these institutions as far right, alt right, whatever. So I hope it gave you some things to think about. Tried to keep it short. I encourage you to have those conversations, and we'll be back soon with some good conversations, I think, with some people that I think you're going to find to be a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us for another episode. I hope I got you thinking and out of your comfort zone. Believe me, the biggest fear your government has is a population that is thinking and talking to one another. So get out there, take a risk, start a conversation, make a friend, and reason with each other. Share the show with someone who you think needs to hear it. I wish you peace and love.